shelter. Simple life. It's all we want to live. Give me food, give me clothes, give me love, and give me shelter. Yeah.
So welcome back to the We2 Movement Podcast. Your host, Ayiti Williams, and today we are diving deep. This isn't just a talk show. This is a call, a moment, a drumbeat echoing across generation. We continue our series, Reclaiming Africa, the rise of a revolutionary leadership and the awakening of a people, a theme that's not just intellectual, it's spiritual. And tonight we are joined by thought leader, visionary, and the voice of the movement. We should have had a couple more individuals, but tonight, for some reason, they won't be able to join in with us. But I have here on the platform our own, the great and brilliant author, Mr. Gebah Kamara, whose new book, I believe that book is already in Amazon, has been sold. But I don't know how many of us have read the book. The book is titled The Return to Africa, Building the Continent's Future. It's shaking the foundation of how we think about migration, identity, and power. Welcome to the show, Mr. Gebah.
Thank you, Ayiti. It's a pleasure always meeting with you and discussing issues relating to the continent and, of course, to our beloved country, Mother Liberia. So again, I just want to say thank you for your, courage and persistence in keeping this show alive. We hope most Liberians and other Africans and individual of interest of Africa will, continue to follow the show, and hopefully, we can reach out to a broader audience around the globe. So again, it's my pleasure, to join you again. Thank you.
Thank you again for being with us to share time and space. This is your home, as you know. You've been on this platform before. And besides this, we've had a series of conversations. So this topic today that also incorporate your book, which is the subtitle, The Return to Africa, Building the Continent's Future. I think it's timely, and it's something that we really need to dive into. We went back, I think it was several weeks ago, we had a topic on our show, because we see this as the time and season where we should now focus on the continent, focus on how we can rebuild our continent. Africa belongs to African, and I think it's just perfect time and season, because the Bible says that there's a time and season for everything. So for the benefit of our show tonight, we went ahead and we demarcated the show into segments. So our first segment here, how the change still echo, understanding our history. Our second segment, which is segment 2, it says rebuilding starts with us. It starts with you and me, it starts with all of us, the role of the diaspora. And our third segment, what does revolutionary leadership look like today? Because I know in time past, when they talk about revolution, people, all they think about is war, is fighting, chaos. But now we can see it from a whole different perspective.
Absolutely.
Right? And then we jump into our fourth segment, because we want inclusivity. I was reading your text. I talk about inclusivity, talk about diversity, talk about inclusion. Talk about a quote that the platform uses a lot of quotes. So I took this quote from one of our ancestors. His name is Ubuntu. And what it is it says, I am because we are. The spirit of Ubuntu and unity. Then we will go ahead. Hopefully we can get into a little bit more conversation, and then we can conclude the show for tonight. Again, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We will jump right into the conversation here tonight, because that's exactly what it will be. This is no question and answer. We just want to, just pick our own brains. So let's begin. Mr. Kamara, you open your book, your text that I just talked about, with a long shadow of the transatlantic slave trade. For many of us, that feels like ancient history. But you argue it's still with us. How so? Because this whole concept of slavery and colonization, I think it still exists. So let's go ahead and talk about, just tell a little bit about this book that you have written, titled "The Return to Africa: Building the Continent's Future."
Thank you, Ayiti, for this opening segment. So to dive right into the questions, one of my first book I wrote is called Slavery and Black American Statehood, and followed by, another series kind of tapping into the history of slavery and Black American statehood with a second book called America Forgotten Star, Liberia. So the book not only talk about the creation of Liberia as a nation, but, by free African American slave who wanted to return back to Africa to reconnect with their ancestral homeland. It's a dream that was long held by their ancestor, despite over 200 or 300 years of separation from the continent itself. Many of them still carry that dying dream of returning back to Africa. Of course, generation of 200, 300 years, the original people that carry that idea never, made it true, right? When you think about longevity in life, especially at the time for Black folks here. However, it was the lingering desire that was always there that Black folks wanted to return back to Africa. So the book captured, before the arrival of Black Americans to the continent of Africa, particularly Liberia, what was the trade system like prior to the arrival of Europeans. Talk about the Arabs before the European came in, and then before the most tragic, a story of Africa where it started with the slave trade. So the book kind of captured all of those different events. So we were not just Africans, and then slave trade came in, and we got shipped over, over to the continent. There were things going on, that I like to emphasize, that the books emphasize. We have the structure, we have civilization, we have culture, we have educational, or development going on. That people from Far East, from the Middle East, from Far East, from Europe. Europe at the time was even non-existent, honestly. It was a deplorable place at the time. But African was striving. People were coming there to learn. So the book captured all of those things and what led to the division that finally broke away the African stability and culture that we have, and allowed the infiltration of, the Arabs first, and then the Europeans, and then the transatlantic slave. So when I talk about Africa, I don't just start from the slave trade, which of course most Black people, especially people here in America, only see it from that light. But what were we before then? So when it comes to, our conversation here, I like to go back to who we were, our accomplishment, our success story before making it to, before being exploited into, the new world, they call it at the time, right? So it has to start from there, because if you don't know the origin of your own history, and we often say, if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. And unfortunately, many Africans don't know where we come from, because our history was not written for us, right? It was written by others and was given to us. So we follow their narrative. And unfortunately, even today, Black folks would rather listen to a white guy who sat in Harvard University, never stepped on the continent of Africa, collect resources, or maybe may go there for a week or two and write a book about Africa. Most of them would call those individual specialists on African affairs. But the actual African who was born there, raised, educated, and come to the West, got educated and know both worlds, people take him for joke. Unfortunately, that's how it had been. So when you ask the question, how many people read these books? No, not many. I know for sure. You know, I feel more people that are not like me reach out to me to tell me about my books. To say, oh my God, I didn't know this story existed. Oh my God, I didn't know this was there. Oh my God, I didn't know this. Oh my God, how come we didn't know this? It's done on purpose. They don't want you to know.
So I'm glad that you brought that up because the issue of the transatlantic slave trade actually is something that I think each child, each African should kind of know about. And just like you alluded to, it's true because if we don't know our actual history, where we came from, then we wouldn't even be able to know how to carry ourselves today and prepare for the future. So it's true because the before our people were taken from Africa, one would say, oh, well, I think you guys should come and bring some facts. It's true. They were already established. They had their kingdoms. They had their governmental structure. It may not be as advanced as the West today, because yesterday, even before the fact that I didn't have the flyer, normally I made it a tradition to do a short. And so I was talking about, because in time past, I've read that before, where even the University of I believe Timbuktu in the city of
Timbuktu, yeah.
Yeah, there were university. They had university there. They had University of Genève. The very in Europe, the University of Salamanca was built by Africans. Mm-hmm. So there was establishment even before the arrival of the imperialists or the colonizer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important that we know that. And in fact, as we go along, we will get into that. So are you saying, Mr. Jiva, that Africa's development today is still being shaped by that particular legacy? Because if we were to take it to what's going on today, the idea of, we're talking about reclaiming Africa, and we see what's going on in Burkina Faso, even in Rwanda, and to some part of Kenya. But let's just zooming on Burkina Faso. Would you say that it is the same legacy that is influencing what's going on in that part of Africa?
I mean, Burkina Faso have a unique history when it comes to what is going on now and what had been happening there prior to now. I mean, the story of Thomas Sankara and all these individuals. One of the things that Africa prior to maybe in the early 60s and 70s and I'll say 80s and even in the early 90s, probably towards the late part of the 90s, revolution in Africa were not carried on by Africans themselves. They always had a colonial, influence into those revolutions. A lot of these revolutions were not carried on by popular uprising. It was carried on by, a system that was designed to control Africans and African resources. So at times, that's why the West like to talk about democracies and freedoms and choice. We know now for sure those things are just slogan, because even in their own country, they are struggling with having true democracy. They are struggling to having true freedom. They are struggling to having free speech. All of those things have been censored or curtailed in some forms, right?
Right.
But in the past in Africa, they make it look like it was an African problems. And as such, we did not know how to rule ourselves. So the big old savior, the white man or the white world, needed to come and save Africa under the pretense, right, that they needed to come save Africa because we didn't know what democracy was. Freedom of speech is no longer, it's not an African thing. Freedom of religion is not an African thing. And so these leaders have been, a stumbling block to allowing those things to happen. So we need to get rid of them. And the coup, the idea around coup in Africa was orchestrated in European capitals or American capitals and then imposed on the people. As the result, a lot of those people that came to power by those coups that was organized didn't meet the need of the people because it was not the people revolution. It was often a revolution orchestrated by outsiders. So many of these people failed miserably, including our own country of Liberia. When Samuel Doe came in, we all know, but not many people know the story of Samuel Doe, coming into power, right? How that was orchestrated at a very upheaval time in world history. You have the Eastern Bloc, you have East and West, you have the Soviet Union, you have China, you have Romania. Those were all powerful nations at the time, by the way. So you had that conflict going on, and everybody was looking for position. Of course, Liberia was a very strategic place for America influences, whereas American CIA, American propaganda, talk about the VOA. VOA was used to propagate American, culture and political view and ideologies and religions around the world, particularly in North Africa, at the time when communist influence was taking over into North Africa. So VOA was very important. Omega Navigation Station was designed, for the CIA to collect intel on other countries in those areas. So when Samuel Doe coup d'etat came in, she has the most support from the U.S. provided more support to Samuel Doe than any other nation in Africa at the time. Samuel Doe was a higher recipient of U.S. aid, right? And because even though Samuel Doe overthrew a democratically elected president, right? So democracy only matters to America when it's their foreign interest. And I often get crazy with these African leaders when they're showcasing themselves around these American or Western leaders and thinking that that's their friend. No, the West don't have friendship. They have interest.
So, Mr. Kamara, then I want to hold you there because of the fact that I see you moving a step further, and I want to bring you back to this transatlantic slave trade that actually led to mass slavery in America, and then as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation that brought about the likes like Garvey, Kwame Ture, all those guys, Nat Turner, and all those people, Harriet Tubman, and things like that. So my thing is, because we're looking, I would say that the ideology of Garvey, the ideology of maybe the Harriet Tubman, and then that led to a guy like Malcolm X or maybe Dr. King, to a large extent, influenced the independence of Africa. Or Ghana, because Kwame Nkrumah will come and steal the idea, run, and that will really work. What can you say to that? Because we're going to get to Liberia shortly, Liberia's independence and all that kind of stuff. So what would you say how the Emancipation Proclamation, the abolition of slavery, what impact did it have on Africa, and is it having on Africa? Because we're talking about independence, but we still see ourselves more like we are still colonized or we're still enslaved because we're not thinking for ourselves. We're not, making decisions for ourselves. Are we truly sovereign or a sovereign state?
Well, just to piggyback a little bit onto, the previous question with Burkina Faso, so I was trying to land onto the idea of what made Burkina Faso revolutionary, steps today look different than previous one, because previous revolution in Africa was controlled from people from outside. Today, as we see across the continent, particularly in that region, from Mali to Guinea to Burkina Faso to Niger. These revolutions are being led by the people. By the people. There's not foreign influence. And I wouldn't say there's definitely no foreign influence, but foreign influence is not the driving factors into these revolutions. That's why they were successfully able to kick out the French, who have held this country on their grips since independence. But they were able to, extricate themselves from France, from America, and all of these superpowers. So the revolution today is driven differently by the people. And you can see it for the case of Niger, right? When the French refused to leave, it wasn't the military that came to the barracks and surrounded the French people. It was actually ordinary Nigerian that stopped that. It's like, you know what? We're going to make sure that you leave this country. So revolution today have changed, right? And that wave is going to go all across the continent because the younger generation demand more. They need more. So that's the difference with previous revolutions and today's revolution. Previous revolution was always bloodshed because it was led by the outsider. Today revolution, you're seeing a different. Gabon, there was no bloodshed, right? Niger, even in Guinea and Mali. So it's different because it's driven by the people. So to come back to, the Trans-America, slavery, transatlantic slavery with regards to the influence of all of those revolutionary that you talked about. I mean, obviously, America or Black American was the driving force behind Africa, picking up the touch to reclaim itself. Because Black American, you talk about Black folks from everywhere in the world, right? We always suffer through colonialism, through the Arabs' intervention in Africa, and so many other different, period in history that African has always suffered, and Black people in general. But Black American, these were people who were extracted from their culture, from their language, from their culture, from their continent, from their family, brought and separated. They had it the hard way, but yet they were able to galvanize themselves and kept that spirit alive for the day that they can yearn for freedom. So they kept the fight going. And also, the fight did not only start here with Black American, because it started from Haiti. When Toussaint and his revolutionaries, kicked the French out, that started the whole revolution in the continent of America, and that even caused American, plantation owner and slave owner to become more harsh on their slave. Fear of what was happening in Haiti may, end up happening in America, but it did not stop. The revolutionary, grew. There were people like, Booker T. Washington, there were so many other revolutionary people that came in to fight for Africa independent and for their independence first, and then Africa independent. And so the voices of those people travel or reverberated across the continent. So Kwame Nkrumah and, Haile Selassie, all of these people you're talking about, they benefited from that. They benefited from the education, from the struggle of these people, even into South Africa. They benefited from Black American initiating that desire to be free because they have proximity to the white man than we were from Africa, right? They knew what they were capable of. They knew these people were weak people. They knew that these people only ways to strive in the world were to keep other people down, right? Because remember, I may stray a little bit off our topic here. Mm-hmm. The most insecure race is the white race. They are the only group of people that have always been invited by stranger. But what did they do? Check their history. They kill, they exploit, they steal in order to stay on top. The fear of a black person being in power terrified them too bad. And we experienced that here when we elected a black man for the first time. You're seeing the virtual. So black Africans revolutionary benefited from the work that was already laid in place from Haiti into the Americas, and then that's kind of went down to Africa, and then we have the like of Kwame Nkrumah, followed by Jerry Rawlings and so many other people that we had that kept the fight going. But to your point, we're not really free. We're not really free, physically, we are no longer held in bondage. And the white men know that. They know that black folks are strong. You can't hold them physically. You just can't hold somebody physically for too long. They're going to keep fighting. But when you control their mind, you control them forever.
Yes.
That's what they were able to do. They wrote our story for us. They gave us religion. They took away our religion and gave them theirs. They took away our language and gave us theirs. They took away our history and gave us theirs. They took away everything, good about us and gave us theirs. So until we can revise those things, I'm not saying throw away the English, throw away the French, throw away the Portuguese, throw away the Spanish. How can we build off what they gave us and what was taken away from us? Until then, we're not totally free.
I'm glad. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you brought that up, because this morning I was talking to one of our supports, and he did mention exactly what you just mentioned about our languages. If we're talking about reclaiming Africa, think about French and think about English. These two languages are not our traditional languages, but these are the languages that we speak the most. In fact, I was listening to Professor Patrick Lumumba, who once, I think he was speaking at a convention or something, doing a presentation. He did mention that how a lot of us, we are so eloquent in articulating the white man's language.
Yeah.
And French. So if you can speak, or maybe you even eloquent in your own dialect, people don't even regard you. So it seems like we have completely moved away from our culture. Now we've adopted and we're taking their culture, tradition, and the custom is even more superior than ours. But just for the sake of time, for those of you who have just tuned in, you're watching the We2 Movement Movement platform, your platform that speaks to for the masses. We have with us in the studio today Mr. Gebah Kamara, who is the author of the text title. I believe we have the title there, the Return to Africa, Building the Continent's Future. And for our show tonight, the title is, I know it's something that we began several weeks ago, titled Reclaiming Africa, the Rise of a Revolutionary Leadership. And I think it's so important that we have this discussion. I'm so glad that you came on. With all that being said, I would like us, for the sake of time, we will transition to our next segment. And the next segment here, I think it's pretty crucial because we find ourselves outside Africa now. So that segment is titled Rebuilding Starts With Us. So the role of the diaspora, I think it's something that you talk about in your text. So I want us to talk a lot about this. But what does that really mean in practical terms? That's one thing I'd like you to kind of, lay out. And then the next follow-up question would be, what can someone in Atlanta or London or Kingston actually do? Because this is where they live in those areas. But what can they do about this or rebuilding the continent? But let's start with the first question. In practice, what does it mean? when it comes, let's talk about the diaspora.
Yeah. So to start with that, what can we do? Let's figure out what is it that we're doing abroad first, right? Because again, like I said, you got to know your history. If you don't know where you come from, it's kind of hard to know where you're going, right? So one of the title in the book is called Contributions Abroad, Neglect at Home: The Dual Narrative of Africa immigrants, right? African immigrants have made substantial contribution to Western society, enriching them with their labor, culture, innovation. However, amidst these valuable contributions, lies a narrative of neglect and marginalization, revealing the challenges faced by African immigrants as they strive for advancement in their adopted, country. These dual narrative, share lights on the complexity of, their experiences, highlighting both their significant contribution abroad and the persistent struggle that they face at home, right? So African immigrants have played a pivotal role in shaping Western society, all across in so many different fields. You talk about even in the labor market, they have been very, essential contributor in filling the gaps in industrial, in industries such as healthcare, education, technology, and so on and so forth, right? Their hard work and dedication have been instrumental in deriving at economic growth and sustaining, essential services to their adopted country. But meanwhile, we are doing all those things abroad, but neglecting the continent. Now, you may ask them, why are we neglecting the continent, right? Why can't all of these professors at every university you go to in the United States, I'll probably say in many parts of the world, you will find an African professor there, particularly Nigerians, right? In every field you think about, you will find an African there, contributing significantly to the growth of these countries and their economic. But meanwhile, many of them never even came home in maybe decades, or some of them are not even connected. And it may not be first generation African. You may find second, third generation Africans, but they still had their root, their tie to the continent. One of the mistakes I think African leaders have always done, and some of it is just based on complete ignorance or petty jealousy, or just not even having the fortitude to understand that you already have the resources. Now, remember, during the scramble for Africa, you have competing countries fighting for African resources, both the natural resources and the human capital. All of those were extracted from the continent, depleting the population of Africa significantly. As God, could make it for us, today Africa stands to be the most populated continent in the world. By 2050, Africa should surpass the like of India, the like of China. By 2050, Africa is going to have the youngest population in the world. And these guys are yawning, hungry for knowledge, thirst for growth, thirst for development. What are we doing to meet that test, right? What are we doing to meet those demands that's going to come? Because this is it. We can make Africa growing, young population an economic opportunity for Africa, or we can make a chaos for Africa. Leaders have to choose. What do you want your young population to look like in 30 years and 20 years from now? Do you want them to be a bunch of bums that hangs around with no education? Or do you want to provide them the best quality education and resources so that tomorrow in 2025 year they can surpass everybody else. So there had not been a concerted effort on the part of government to tap into the diaspora. It's always that resistance, unnecessary bureaucracy to make it difficult for you and I to even go and settle, to do business, to establish stuff, to even go there to, if you even want to work in the government over there, there is an obstacle for you because people see you as an outsider now. So when you think about the Philippines and Indonesia, they invested heavily in the diaspora to bring them back, repatriate them. Many other countries did the same thing. I have not seen, except for Uganda, I have not seen many countries in Africa that is putting resources in there. Let's look around in America. How many Liberians do we have? How many Nigerians we have? How many Nigerian doctors? What can we do to repatriate these people? Now, I get it. You're not going to meet their life standard, the standard of living that they have here, But people, some of us right now, we are the end tail of our contribution to America because I live here. I'm tired.
So I want to go home. I want to hold you there for a second. I'll allow you to continue because, now that you're talking about that, there's a picture that's been, created in my head. Mm-hmm. So I know we're talking about reclaiming Africa and that Liberia is a subset of Africa. And so I want us to kind of now, for a few minutes, let's focus on Liberia because you talk about Liberia in 2050. Africa will have the youngest and most populated continent, we just say. So if you look at a country like Liberia that's brain drained, what can you say? How can we and then the same thing with Liberia. We have a country that is very divisive. There's resistance. If you were opportune to come here and you were to go back to Liberia, they see you as a threat. People are so minute. What can we do, to bridge that gap? Because we're talking about the diaspora. We keep talking about, and this is where remittances to that country. I believe strongly that the national budget of Liberia is somewhat all in remittance what we sent. Yeah. I'm not talking about what's on paper, even some that we did there. It's not on paper.
Yeah, that's not on paper. Absolutely. Yep.
We surpass the national budget. What can we do to bridge that gap? Because we have a demographic in the country they refer to as Zogo. If you talk about Nigeria, we got Nigerian doctors all over the place. We got lawyers, we got engineers. We also have some of those experts in who are Liberians too. So for a country like Liberia, how can we? Because at the end of the day, what we are striving for here, we're striving for a united Africa. But if we will have a united Africa, we want to have a continent that will to a large extent, will be uniformly dispersed when it comes to experts, people who have careers, the trades, people who venture into trades, and stuff like that. But what would you say about Liberia? Diaspora is being opposed. Those from the diaspora, you go, and sometimes too, the opposition stems from the fact that those of us who come from here, we see them as insignificant individuals because we've come here, we learn something, and this and that. So how do we reconcile all of some of those things that I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with you, and for a very long time, I've always, before I even started writing, I always had this mindset of how can we tap into the diaspora as they contribute to the continent. And I definitely remember during Ellen Johnson Sirleaf time, or even the early stage of Charles Taylor, the remittance from abroad was pretty much the national resources. And today, businesses in Liberia that are operated by Liberians themselves, most of the resources or finances of those resources came from abroad, from Liberia living abroad. Because, the banking system over there is not structured in a way that, people get loaned to actually start business. A lot of hurdles into it. So most of the time, family members from here contribute their money to family members and friends over there to start, businesses, apart from the Lebanese and all these other, foreign investors in the country, right? So the diaspora has always contributed. And I can tell you vividly, even during the Ebola, Liberians here contributed significantly, to the eradication and the treatment of, the Ebola pandemic that came to Liberia. I think for me, what I see as an obstacle, and I always use this example. I said, if we all were born in the village and one of us left and went to Monrovia, got an education, got a job, graduate college or high school, got a job there, and this guy returned back to the village and want to live with his people in the village. And the village people say, oh, no. You don't want to anymore. Using the Liberian term, you probably went to, Monrovia, you quit man now, so you can't come by, you're not one of us. How will you feel if that was the narrative? Because that's exactly what some of them are saying to those of us that had left and came here. We came here for so many different reasons. It was war in the country, we came for economic stability, we came, some of us escaped the war, and so many other different reasons. Now that we have getting this education, experience, and waiting to contribute to our country, when we go by, we are seen as opposition, honestly. Because you have people, I'm not saying all of them, but you have people in position who are small-minded. They're not visionary. That when they're thinking about today, what can they make for themselves? What can you put in their pocket today? They don't have a clue that if I have a house here and everyone else around me live in the dark, my house is the only house with a light. If trouble broke up or anything that comes up and people escaping from the dark, where they going to run? In the dark? They're coming to the light. So you're not totally safe. You're not totally, awake until the neighbors around you all have a light. So they don't see the need to power in your compound when trouble breaks up because they can see their way around, right?
I like that analogy.
People don't see that. A lot of these people don't see that because of, again, the small-mindedness and maybe lack of exposure in so many ways. So we have, and again, so that's that's one of the obstacles. And again, some of us, and I always tell people that, I'm glad that you brought that question up because most of the time when I go to Liberia to visit, people will be like, oh, well, yeah, people from America that come here, they go into the government, they can become the worst, corrupt people, or they can do the worst thing and all of that. And people from America, from abroad, always become the worst when they go into government or other places. And this is what I said. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this is what I tell them. I say, I get you. I understand. But listen, not every Liberian that leave from here and go to Liberia is qualified or fit enough to serve in various capacity that they're being elected to. A lot of these people go into these positions because they know who's appointing them, they know who in leadership, they know who's in control, but they're not being put in these places based on their qualification or what they can actually contribute to the country. So, and most of them, when they come here, they don't assimilate. They stay within the Liberian culture.
Wow.
They go to Liberian parties, they go to Liberian gathering, and that's all they know. So you put some of these people in a 5-star restaurant and tell them to order, give them a menu. They don't even know where to start from. They've never even been in those spaces, right? So they go by home. You see them as this guy from America that have all the knowledge. In their little mind, they see you as being weak. But guess what? This man is not even Americanized. This man is not Africanized. He's not Liberianized. he's caught in the middle, right?
Right.
He want to pretend like he know better than you, right? And as a result, he really doesn't know anything to contribute. So those kind of people become very dangerous. It's called semi-educated minds are the most dangerous people than educated people, honestly, because they don't know their limit. But when you're educated, you know your shit. What you worry about? You know, you don't flinch by the fly touching your career path because it's your career. You've spent time, you know, learning, developing, and working in this field. You're confident in yourself. Right. So a lot of these guys are not confident in themselves. So when they go there, they protect and put a barrier around them. Listen, I've left from here and go to see many Liberian leaders. Sometimes it's not even the leader. The people around that make it hard for you to see them. You know, a very prominent Liberian who was running to become president. You know, I wrote a children's book about him because everyone keep asking, oh, but no one know anything about this guy. No one know about this guy. So I decided to do a research on it. Phenomenal. Great story. Great Liberian story. If this man was in the West, come from anywhere in the West, his story will be front page for people to admire, to follow. And I'm talking about Alexander Cummings. So when I did the research, the thing that this man said 10, 15, 20 years prior to he even contesting in the presidency was so on point. And you look at his upbringing from where he came from. This is a man in the 90s. And yet you and myself know, even now, you know, or 10, 15, 20 years ago, the certain position Black people here can't even ascend to. Right. But this is an African man came with a funny name, Alexander B. Cummings, right? Got his education, was elected or appointed in, you know, some of the most fortunate, you know, companies in this country and led billions of dollars investment and employees. What did they say? Because he was Black? Because they see a knowledge in this man. Yes. And I'm like, this man's story need to make it to the limelight. When I went and met with his people, you know what they told me? They said, yeah, Jiva, thank you for writing this great story, but you know, Liberian people can't read. Wow. I said, okay, Liberian people can't read, so what are you going to do about it? If they can't read, and for full disclosure, because we didn't sign no contract, this was his wife telling me this. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, you want to be the first lady of Liberia. And I'm bringing something to you that had never been done that could help promote your husband, even make your husband the next president for Liberia. And you telling me Liberian people can't read? So therefore you can't even, you know, support the book? Or why don't you take this book and go read to the people?
You want that vision.
But it is the mindset that most of us come from here. Yes. You know, we look down upon the people in the continent just because we have some level of exposure or education. But no, every idea matters. To build Liberia, we would need to depend equally on the people on the ground as well as the idea that is coming from outside. Every idea is worth putting together to build a country. So I think a lot of Liberian problem is just based on our small-mindedness, you know, our insecurity, you know, our, you know, a lack of ability or to respect one another, you know, on a personal level and professional level. Because I mean, it's hard, man. It's hard for me to figure out Liberian sometimes, honestly.
I certainly agree with you, and I would like to add this, you know what I mean, because I think the problem we have is not major. I would say the major problem is not money. It's just like you just said. I think sometimes it's the mindset, and that's why we too continue to propagate this message and to change your mindset. Because if we change the mindset of the people, then we change the things around. Just like you said, look at the analogy that you give. People come here, the only parties to go to Liberian parties, to go see them in basements, to see them on the soccer pitch, and the interact. own kind. They
That's it.
allow when they're amongst their people,
Yep.
but see them at the job, they say nothing. They don't
Yep.
want to step out of the box. They're
Yep.
comfortable. But then when they
Yep.
go, everything you do it so that when you go to Africa, you know what I mean? So now, so you went to school and you learned accounting, or you became a sociologist, or you became this anthropologist. Is it well suited for Africa? Is it well suited for Liberia? You know,
Exactly.
we need to take into account. So you go there, you're from America, never even assimilated into the society.
Yeah.
And you find yourself again going back. So you said you're caught in between the rock and the hard place. You're not very, you're not really assimilated. But at the same time, you lost some of your culture too, because you get caught up in between. Masquerading, you know what I mean? But yes.
That's a very valid point you just raised. You know, that's a really valid point you raised, because again, a lot of these guys come here, get those degrees, and you know, never work one day in that field. Never one day work in that field.
Yeah, G-Man, you think why we had a topic several weeks ago. I think we talked about re-imaging the education system of Liberia. You know what I mean? From cultural, traditional, and global competence. Because if the same thing we can say, we're talking about reclaiming Africa. If we think reclaim Africa, then we must customize our educational system to fit.
Absolutely, to fit our people.
Yeah, fit our people.
Absolutely.
What are some of the problems that we face with?
Absolutely. And I often say this, you know, even to, you know, my students and, you know, other folks that I, you know, lecture with. The benefit of education is not to just go and consume all that knowledge in you, and that's it. You consume all that knowledge. How do you leave that place to transform that knowledge into another area where you can transform the people mind?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Learning a sociology, having a sociology degree here, some of those ideas and principles may not be applicable in an African community or society or village, because the economic and political structure that support that level of education or that mindset or that concept of education does not fit that particular location you are in right now. But how do you tailor? You use the word tailor. How do you tailor that education to transform it in a way where you're incorporating the local, right? The local, the culture, the political setting of that particular area to transform life? That's what you call education. It's not consuming, having these titles and accolades, and that's it. And then you walk around, you know, with your whatever mindset and walking around. Oh, I got 2 masters, I got this. What have you done with that? What transformation have you bring? You got a degree in economics, yeah, that's good. But your economic education or principle may not be applicable in an African community or society or village.
Right.
So trying to impose that there, that's why you have failed economic policies in Africa, because a lot of the time we're taking the education from London, from America, from France, and other places, and trying to make it applicable in an African culture. No, these are Western design education. Take that with you, follow that principle, and create your own.
Yes.
You know, create your own to meet with the environment that you are in. That is what you call education. You know. But because these people get these accolades or you know, or titles, they have never worked in those areas. They go back home, they don't even know how to apply it because it's not applicable in that area. So they don't know how to tweak it, to transform it. But if you use that here and work with it here, you would know, okay, what works and what don't work. And if I was to move from one location to another location, I know this principle is not applicable there. So I need to create, and that's why the creativity come in. When you know, education is part of creativity too, right? So that's where that mindset come in. Okay, I need to redesign, reconfigure this to meet with the demand of the people here. That's what you call education. And I think that principle is lacking in a lot of our people, and I would say particularly in Liberia, honestly.
I like that. That was strong. So now we're transitioning to our next. It's often said that it takes the education from theory into practice. Otherwise, that education is useless.
Useless.
So I normally say, because if you cannot take your education, so you learn all that now, it's not applicable to your domain.
Yeah.
So that quite useless.
Absolutely.
So then next segment here, real quick, because I know we're running out of time. I know we didn't even start at 8. We start somewhere around about 8:20. The next segment is titled, "What Does Revolutionary Leadership Look Like Today?" So we've had revolutionaries like Nelson Mandela, Kwame Nkrumah, Tubman, but today leadership doesn't always come with marching crowd. We don't see that kind of revolutionary leadership or style, you know what I mean, or a jail sentence, because we know Nelson Mandela he did 27 years in prison. Even Nkrumah, when he left America, left the West and then went to Africa, because he was really optimistic, and that thing worked. And he was locked up in prison. We know he was in prison while he was elected prime minister of today's Ghana, at the Gold Coast. So my thing is, what does a revolutionary leader look like in 2025? What would be your
I think if you ask me what a revolutionary leader looks like in 2025 or moving the continent forward, would be leaders or individuals who actually have their people at heart, number one. They're not seeking their own self-interest, or rather the interest of their people.
So would you say Captain Traoré is unique, is a unique revolutionary, or his style? Because this, whatever it is, a lot of people term it as, it was the military junta, military coup, whatever, he took over the government. So how would you refer to that?
Well, I mean, I just think people should cut it off, right? You have democracy in Africa that becomes tyrant. People are elected to democratic principle in Africa, right? And many times, or 100% of the time, they become tyrants after they are elected to the democratic process. So there's no different from them and the military people. So let's get that thing straightened up. When these people begin to criticize, military, took over elected government. Yeah, you have elected government who become tyrants, right?
Right.
Who become tyrant to the people, who exploit the people, murder the people, or steal the country resources, right? But yet they were elected through democratic means. So should we stay considered to lionize those people because they were, elected democratically? And then you have a guy who came in through military means, right? Through a revolution. Because listen, a lot of time for a country to move forward, including the United States, sometimes the blood of tyrants and innocents must be spilled to move country forward, to move a nation forward. It happened everywhere in the world. The French Revolution, Napoleon was a tyrant, right? A lot of bloodshed. Napoleon was killed and his head was hanged in the city of Paris, right? America, we have a revolutionary war here in order, and blood was shed. Tyrant blood was shed. London had their own, the cradle of democracy, modern democracy. So yeah, it happened everywhere in the world. I think the question is, what kind of leader or revolutionary do we have? What is their mindset? What is their goal? What is their relationship to their people? I think that should be the biggest question. Yes, I would wish that if Africa could have could have a democratic system, but all the democratic system in Africa have failed Africa. So there's nothing wrong with trying something that is different. In my mindset, honestly, there is nothing wrong. Sometimes revolution needs to come to reset the body. Today, the reason Ghana is thriving today because Jerry Warren set the page to allow this transition that happens.
To
Right?
add to what you're saying, and I'll allow you to continue. I think what's the question that I asked you. I think why I continue to focus on that. I don't know, for some reason, is that you can see that the new revolutionary leadership style that we see is purpose based, it's rooted in purpose. Like the Pan-Africanism. We know back then people were talking about Africa belongs to Africa, and I think this is what is. But at the same time now, for example, I'll go back again because I keep using, I don't know, for some reason, even in Rwanda, what I mean? It's about uplifting his people. And you see that the synonymous to what's going on in Burkina Faso.
Yeah, Burkina Faso, Mali,
Niger. But the difference here,
Guinea, even in Guinea. There's a transformation that is going on that we've never seen before.
Yes.
There's transformation that is going on that we've never seen before.
Yeah, people first.
So, I mean, again, the difference with previous revolution and today's revolution, Africa, the world is a global hub now. We are interconnected through the advent of technology and all these, modern systems that have allowed us to be connected from a distance. So African see the rest of the world, they see other young people, they see how they're striving. They want that for themselves. Africans today know that their country resources is being exploited outside of the continent, and those resources being used and developed and sent back to us at a higher cost. They know that now. Before then, our parents didn't know any of that. Our parents just make food, get food for us, the family eat, that's it. Education was not even an option for some families, right? But now every parents want their child to have an education, have a level of exposure, have a level of interaction with the rest of the world. So based on all of those reasons, the mindset of our people right now, especially the young generation, is different. So they're demanding change. They want change. What happened in Burkina Faso and other places? I would say Burkina Faso because it's led by a younger leader, right? But that is going to be a trend that will evaporate in many parts of Africa. Is these old leaders who are almost on the dying bed cannot change. And I don't expect them to change because they've been stuck into whatever in the 80s, most of them in the 80s and 90s and late 70s. They can't, the wire is not there to connect with today's modern demand, modern technology, modern demands of what is required to move a striving, economy, a global population, to move them forward, entrepreneurship, innovation, all of those things. Most of them cannot connect the dot. They're far distant from the people. Once they get elected, they go back into what they know. I mean, I don't expect a 70-year-old or 80-year-old man to change, obviously, right? So, but the demand from the young people is gonna demand that. And as a result, what we see in Burkina Faso and other places is not gonna be the end. Until all of those, old folks, either they step away peacefully and allow for modern transition to happen, or they will step away through other means that probably may not be, the best course of action. But the world is moving fast, and Africa wants change. Africa young generation are yearning for change. They're demanding for change. They're demanding for progress, for development, for innovation, for creativity, for entrepreneurship. All of those things they're demanding for it. If we can't give it to them, then of course we're going to continue to, have turmoil in many African cities and streets. So that's the difference with today's revolution, revolutionary compared to the revolutionary of the past. A lot of the time it was just driven by the leaders because the leaders have the idea. Today it's driven by the people, the population, because access to information is literally in the hands of, almost everybody, honestly,
Thank you so much. I just want to add this, infuse this into the conversation tonight. For those of you who have just tuned in, this is again the We2 Movement podcast. We have on the show tonight Mr. Gebah Kamara. He's the author of the book Return to Africa. What is this? It said building what?
Building the continent future.
All right. So a few things maybe some of us don't know about Africa, but I believe that just like you use the word, I'll take that from you, is being reverberated. Africa is the most attractive mineral resource continent in the world. 80 to 90% of the world's cobalt, supply comes from Africa. You know what I mean? 69% of the world's magnesium come from Africa. 75% of the global world's phosphorus rock reserve is in Africa. So, I mean, we can go on and on and on and on. 60% of the world's uncultivated agricultural land is still in Africa. So,
and rivers.
Man, we
got and rivers.
We're just limited to Africa. I mean, Liberia, I talked about on the short that I did yesterday. The longest in West Africa. Liberia has the longest coastline. We got rivers. Look at Burkina Faso is landlocked. We got landlocked countries in Africa. Look at what's happening in DRC. So Africa is on the rise. Garvey once said, rise up, you mighty nation. This is our time. This is our dispensation. It's good that we will come here. I'm going to use this medium to have these conversations. Our platform is not to show off, but it's really to educate, to cultivate, and to empower the socially and morally conscious youth. So, Diva, for the sake of time now, I think we'll just transition to our next segment because you've said it all, and this will be our last segment. That is, I am because we are. The spirit of Ubuntu and unity. That's the concept that we follow. This concept of I am because I'm only doing good if you're doing good. What is your riches? If you have this big mansion and 50 rooms, then you have a guy who lives right next door. Can I even afford? I'm talking about a bed to lay his head on. And this is the problem that we have in our country, Liberia, in the continent. Because the reason why one will want to have all for himself, because this is what we have been taught. So this is the time for us now to change the narrative. How can we do it? Because we have to teach, we have to be the example so that our brothers and sisters can see. Africa really does belong to Africa. So there's an old saying that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go
farther, go together.
Go together, right? We know the power of unity, but how do we live it across the continent? Kamara, by listening to you, collaborating and seeing ourselves in each other, I believe Ubuntu isn't just a philosophy; it's a strategy. That strategy of unity. So we really need to come together. But I want to ask you one question before we kind of close here, and then you will give us your closing remark, because I really do have a whole bunch of questions here. But I'm just gonna ask you this one question, and then we will conclude. So my last question to you: what lesson can Liberia teach the rest of Africa about rebuilding from chaos?
It's a very good question. I think, and that's why I'm I'm proud of myself for being able to rewrite Liberia's history in a narrative that I understand because of the privilege given to me to be able to grow up in both, on both continents. Growing in Liberia, started my early education there. Very exposed to Liberian culture, because I have friends in every aspect, and I travel a little bit in Liberia. And then being able to come to the United States and having that opportunity of education, and also being able to travel a lot in different parts of the globe and seeing different things and cultures and just admiring, a lot of those places that I go to, and then when I reflect back to, Liberia and see the same kind of landscape, there, and just wonder, wow, why if we could turn this place into something else, right? It would be the same. Like for example, I'll give you a quick example, like Ravensburg. If you ever been to Ravensburg, Ravensburg is the layout is no different from St. Martin, yeah, in the Caribbean. Same kind of layout. Same kind of layout. But you go to Ravensburg, you don't even have a restaurant there, right? You don't even have a store, a really fitting store. You don't have no boutique. You don't have literally you have nothing. It feel like it stayed back in the 19th century, honestly. But Liberia have come a long way. We were once pioneers in the world. We were once the global supplier of, iron ore, of rubber, right? Global supplier of those things, right? We contributed to the building of Europe through our mineral resources. We contributed to the building of America through our mineral resources. Liberia became the first, independent country in Africa at the time when many African countries were still under the yoke of, colonizations, right? Through Liberia initiated the Pan-African, organization was built. The OAU, Organization of African Unity, was built. The Youth of Nations, which is now the United Nations, Liberia have a pivotal role in that. Half of your revolutionary people today, the Kwame Nkrumah, even the first president of Nigeria, most of them went to Liberia and gained their education. Liberia has some of the world Africa oldest, universities there. Liberia was a place where everyone wanted to go. Just like people wanted to come to America, people in Africa wanted to go there because it was so free, considered free. Yeah, we may argue, compound with that, but it was relatively a free, independent country. And being the first in the continent, most people gravitated there. And because Black American was able to bring their talent there, the idea of revolutionary, the idea to fight for freedom, Liberia became a cradle, to build leaders. Nelson Mandela, all of those people went to Liberia in their prime time as they began to form themselves to, fight against the yoke of colonization holding down their country. So we have a lot to give. We have a lot to teach to the world. But I think for the younger generation right now, we did them a disservice not providing adequate educational opportunity for them. Every child in Liberia should have today, and I go right back to Nigeria. The reason today we all claim that Nigerians are the most educated people in Africa is not that they're smarter than us, right? But Nigeria's first president, when he took over, he had one goal in mind. Every child in Nigeria will have access to education from the kindergarten all the way to high school. That was compulsory and free. Only people in the north refuse. And even with that, they pay the parents to allow their kids to go to school. So as a result, education in Nigeria became competitive, became competition. Oh, Ayiti household got 2 master's degrees. Oh, I'm going to get a PhD. I don't want a master. And it just became normal. You don't even ask the Nigerian household, are you going to go to college? It was already set. So when you see a Nigerian person, no matter how they made low, like we used to like to say in Liberia country, they educate us. Even if it's not from college, they have some level of education. And we have not provided that to our young people. So as a result, the young people don't even know what Liberia was. Right? They don't even know the Monrovia today that we look down upon. Monrovia looked like a freaking abandoned city. For people who actually walk that street, I still have older people here in the 80s and 90s telling me about stories about Monrovia, how the city used to be this, how Pan American Airline, British Caledonia, Air France, all those airlines went to Liberia. When something came out today in America this week, you would find it in Liberia. That's how the country was, man. Liberia was something. Our young people don't know that. We have not done anything educational wise to make them to appreciate what they have or what they used to have. And how can we get there? Until they know that, where they can appreciate their history and begin to work on reclaiming that history and even make it better, it's going to be a struggle. And for the life of me, I don't understand why providing free education in Liberia, free compulsory education in Liberia, is not a thing. If I have a magic wand, every child in Liberia will go compulsory. We go to school, not selling on the market, not selling in the street, not selling anywhere, or not doing any other thing or becoming Zogo or whatever else you call it, but in school, providing that education, because we would not go anywhere if we don't educate our young people. And I don't understand why our leaderships from the Ellen Johnson, which I expected more of her, right? Jawia, questionable, but at least he had an opportunity to institute those things. Barker, he just got there, probably sleeping most of the time. I don't know if you understand those things, but we would not move if we don't educate our young people. Because again, like I said to you, African population can become an opportunity for global progress, or it can become a hindrance for global progress. Because when these people don't have the education, don't have the social mobility to move forward, they become liability on the society. And when it becomes a liability on the society, that leads to crime, that leads to all kinds of ill social vibes that we don't want in the country. So until we can understand that yes, we have gold, we have diamond, we have rubber, we have timber, we have all that. Those are natural resources, great. But the main natural resources are the people and the young people. Yeah. If we don't invest in that first, like that, all your gold and diamond and stuff, the European, the Americans, the Russians, the Chinese, will take all of that and build their own young people who will continue to come by to do the same thing to your people. Let's build our young people first. And I think that's what we can teach our people, honestly.
I mean, just so much, James, that you're throwing out there. I mean, I'm provoked to ask you a couple more questions, but I know we're running out of time. It was a pleasure having you. But just before we close, I think let me go with this one last question, because we're talking about reclaiming. And I mentioned that on the short yesterday. To reclaim means that the definition to have, someone take it, and then you try to get it back.
Yeah, try to get it back, yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking about the diaspora, return to Liberia. So, in very, very brief, and then maybe in 1 minute, what would you, let me say it this way, right? What are 3 small things someone in the diaspora can do today to build the continent?
Well, I think for me is providing your services, your talent, and skill set. I have already started that path a little over 5, 6, 7 years ago, but in recent time, at least for the past 3 or 4 years, I have made it much more tangible, right? Me, along with my wife, my mother-in-law, we established a nonprofit group that cater to providing educational resources to Liberia. We provide books, computers, cell phone, digital learning, and other support to over 5 schools in Liberia. We have over 10 girls that we support to go to school in Liberia. We paying for their tuition. We pick some of them up from 6th grade, some of them in 2nd, some of them in 9th, some of them in 10th, until they graduate from high school. We are responsible for them. Every year, we go to Liberia with donation that we collect to distribute to the people. We formed a women group in Robert Sports that live in the fishing community but had no resources. So most of them were sleeping with the Fontaine people or the fishermen in order to sustain their family members. We told them, okay, we're not here to reinvent the wheel. You already know how to sell fish. What can we do to enhance you? Rather than you go into the Fontaine man to get fish from them, sleep with them, and go sell the fish, and most of the time you bring the fish by, with no profit, we're going to make you fish for yourself. We bought 2 boats. We bought motors and put it on the boat. Today, these women are striving. They're making their own business. This is nothing that is not even announced on Liberian TV, social media, nothing. We did it because genuinely we want to see progress. We want to uplift these people. We want to see them doing something. All of our contribution, Liberian people don't even know about it. I remember the Liberian senator said, like, "You're doing all this thing. How come we don't know?" I said, "I don't need your fanfare. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do."
Yes.
So to answer your question, you don't have to do what I'm doing. Maybe I have the resources to do what I'm doing, but you may have other resources, your education, your experience. Find out what is it that you're able to do, that you can provide. What level of education, even if it's just training. Put that training things together. It's so easy now to develop those things. Take your time, go there. Even though one person, start with one person, start with one community, start with one school. You can enhance from there. So we all have something to contribute. So it's not always the money, it's about the knowledge, because the money will go, but the knowledge will not go. And you can share that knowledge with other people. And for me, I think we can start from there, checking ourselves. Because the bottom line is for me, Ayiti, when I'm there tomorrow, I don't want to ask how many money that I have in the bank. I want the question to be, how many lives did he touch?
Yes.
How many people life that he make different? Right? Because those are the stories that will live after you.
True.
And yeah.
Seven was a pleasure, man. Seven was a pleasure as always to have you come and share time and space with us. As a tradition, would like to say that there was a lot that you brought to the forefront, and hopefully, our viewers who will watch the show afterwards, they can take their time to go. And I think these are the things that we need to really talk about. We're talking about reclaiming Africa, return to and the awakening. The rise of revolutionary leadership and the awakening of a people. We could not put that up there because it's so limited. The software or the screen will only allow us to put in a certain amount of letters, and then we talk about return to Africa. That's the book that's written by Mr. Gebah, and it says building, the continent's future.
Yeah.
This is the time that we live in now, that's a great saying that was said by somebody. I'm not very sure, but I guess he was at a college convocation and he asked a question: how many people are you going to put in your bus when you said that you don't want to be, how do you want to be remembered? Is a great question that we need to answer. And I mean, we ourselves need to answer. And that's why the motivational speaker, Les Brown once speaking said, imagine yourself on your deathbed, and around your deathbed are your gifts, your talents, that God gave to you. You didn't use them, now you're going to the grave. You have to go to the grave for that. So it's important, Africa is not poor, Africa is not broken, Africa is not waiting. It's rising,
It's rising.
It's not the gun, it's not in the book. It's the ballot, the boardroom, the brush, the classroom, you know, because if you think that the revolution is just sitting in the book, you go, you read it, and it's going to change the country. No, it's in our action, it's in what we will do. You know what I mean? It's in our hands. So we got to get the work done. You know, Kwame Nkrumah once said, he said, the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of Africa.
Yeah.
That's the history. That's the homework. To our listeners across the globe, hear this. You are not a remnant. We're not remnant. You know what I mean? We are whole people. We're a whole nation. We came here to do something and make a difference. You know, we are builders. You know what I mean? A bridge, a revolution is in our skin and our bone. Don't ask when Africa will rise. Ask how will I rise with it.
With it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Family, remember this. We are in this together.
Yep.
Waiting for this, and the time is now. Let us return to Liberia. Let us return to Africa. Let us rise. Why Africa is the real powerhouse in the world. I think
absolutely
things, you know what I mean? We have all the resources, everything that we need. We need to be better, you know what I mean? Again, thank you very much for coming. It has been a very, very great show. This is how we're going to close the curtain. I'm your host, Ayiti Williams. I look forward to seeing you again another time. Thank you very much, Mr. Gebah, and you have a great and pleasant night.
You do the same, brother. Thank you so much. And again, don't forget the continent. You know, don't sit by and let the boats miss you, man. You know, the action is in Africa. Invest your resources, your time, and your energy, and your talent. You would not regret it.
Right. Have a good night, Mr. Gebah.
Good night, brother. All right. Peace.
It's all we want to live. Give me food, give me clothes, give me love, and give me shelter.